For better or worse, the isekai genre is big in anime, manga, and especially in light novels. If you're into any of these mediums of entertainment, you probably have seen or read at least one isekai, and you probably also have opinions on isekai as a genre. But if you're a normie who somehow managed to find this video, you might not know what an isekai is, so here's a brief primer. Isekai is a Japanese word that literally means other world, or different world, or strange world. The kanji for I has so many different nuances, though sekai just means world. Sometime around the 2010s, when Sword Art Online burst onto the scene, English-speaking anime fans adopted the word into our lexicon as the title of a genre. So to English-speaking fans, isekai means a genre where a protagonist from our world is transported into another world, usually a fantasy setting. We do have an English term for this, it's portal fantasy, but in the otaku sphere, it's isekai. Examples of some popular modern isekai anime, manga, and light novel series are Sword Art Online, Re:Zero, Konosuba, Mushoku Tensei, So I'm a Spider So What, and My Next Life as a Villainess. You've probably seen or at least heard of some of these. Popular isekai series from my generation, which you may not have heard of, but you should definitely check out because they're awesome, are Fushigi Yugi, Magic Knight Rayearth, Escaflowne, and Inuyasha. And if you want to learn more about the history and evolution of isekai as a genre and as a market, Colleen's Manga Rex recently did a video on shoujo isekai that touches on that, and there's a list of good sources in their video description to check out as well. So, confession time. I actually really like isekai. The isekai storytelling medium can be a great device to introduce you, the reader or the viewer, to an unfamiliar world through the eyes of a protagonist who is just as confused as you are. With straight fantasy, all the characters in the world belong there, so they already know how it works. Because of this, straight fantasy runs the risk of explaining the world's lore via clunky exposition. And I love fantasy, I really do, but it's always hard for me to get into a new series because it takes me hundreds of pages or several episodes to understand how the world works, who the characters are, and what the fuck is going on. And as far as isekai anime goes, I like it too. I can't say I've ever watched an isekai anime that I didn't like. One of my favorite anime of all time, Fushigi Yugi, is an isekai. My husband and I recently watched Konosuba, and I enjoyed that a lot. And I even like that anime. Yes, that anime. Unironically. I'm sorry, it's a great show with fun characters, and Yuki's story arc made me cry. But if you ask the general otaku population, everyone's sick of isekai. Now, I'm going to slip into opinion mode if you'll indulge me for a minute. I think that some of this isekai hate is just reactionary. Sword Art Online, for example, was quite popular when its anime adaptation came out in the early 2010s. Many of my friends between the ages of 18 and 25 were really into it, and even a couple friends of mine and their teenaged kids who aren't into anime watched and enjoyed it. But between the first wave of SAO fans getting older and isekai series oversaturating the market, I think a lot of fans wanted to distance themselves from that craze. Since isekai fandom was so big, an anti-isekai fandom rose, so that older and more enlightened otaku could define themselves. Ugh, isekai animes are just so bad. They're unoriginal, derivative, and only immature, normie otaku like them. I'm not like other anime otaku. Now, to be fair, there are plenty of legitimate criticisms to be made about isekai as they currently exist in the otaku sphere. In shounen and seinen isekai, that is, isekai with a male demographic, many of the common criticisms are overpowered protagonists, gratuitous fan service, generic fantasy worlds that seem lazy and aren't fully fleshed out, systemic issues going unchallenged, looking at you, slavery, and that the genre as a whole is too insular, catering only to gamers and weebs. Modern shoujo and josei isekai, that is, isekai series that are catered to the female demographic, are not immune to these problems either. Caitlin, of Anime Feminist and Anime News Network, recently pointed out that even the isekai series with a female demographic still push traditional gender roles. But just because there have been problems with the genre as a whole, that doesn't mean that every single isekai that's created is doomed to be derivative fanservice-y trash. Stepping away from the anime-manga light novel sphere for a moment, let me remind you that the concept of somebody coming from our world into another world is not just the latest overplayed otaku craze. Alice in Wonderland, or Through the Looking Glass, was a playful isekai that showed us, through a whimsical collage of the absurd, that sometimes it's good to be silly, but there's also value in being mature and earnest. Jumanji was a comedic isekai, where teen stereotypes were zapped into a video game, forced to play avatars completely unlike their real-world counterparts, and learning about themselves and empathy for others in the process. And quite possibly my favorite isekai is His Dark Materials, a series that explores the concept of the soul, the evils of organized religion, and the power of friendship and love. I highly recommend both the books by Philip Pullman and the HBO series, which are the only forms in which this story exists. There is definitely not a movie of it. Nope. The isekai genre has limitless possibilities. It doesn't always have to be a story about a teenage Japanese boy who gets hit by a truck and then reincarnated into a fantasy world where he's the overpowered chosen one and every single girl is hot and wants to date him. And not that there's anything inherently wrong with that either. A little fluffy escapism now and then can be a good thing. So we're what, 6 minutes into the video now? And you're probably wondering why I haven't started my review of the Princess of Convenient Plot Devices yet.
Video starts at 6:32.
I was frankly worried that if I didn't frame the review this way, that people wouldn't give this series a chance, let alone watch this video. So now that I've hopefully established that isekai can be good actually, let me introduce you to a light novel series by Mamechoro, whose first volume was released by Yen Press today, The Princess of Convenient Plot Devices, or Watashi wa Gotsuugou Shugi na Kaiketsu Tantou no Oujo de Aru in Japanese. And I'm going to be calling it Watago for the rest of this video because that's the abbreviation that the author uses.
Plus it's a lot easier to say than Watashi wa Gotsuugou Shugi na Kaiketsu Tantou no Oujo de Aru. That's hard to say in one breath.
Watago is a story about an otaku named Maki, who dies and gets reincarnated as Princess Octavia in The Noble King, a fantasy series she was obsessed with in her past life. This part of the premise reminds me a lot of the self-inclusion Shigeyugi fanfic I wrote when I was 17. It sounds like it's going to be a reverse harem isekai where our girl gets reincarnated into a world full of bishonen and ikemen, and they're all obsessed with her. The only catch is that Maki is a fujoshi. That is, a girl who loves man-on-man romances. And her favorite series was A Boy's Love, meaning all the romanceable guys are in love with each other. The Noble King, Maki's favorite BL series in her past life, is a story about Sirius, the crown prince of Esphia, who is in love with Silberks, a lower-ranking nobleman. They overcome obstacles to be together, the biggest of which is how will they produce an heir? Esphia is a patriarchal system where kings marry other men and get their blood heirs from their sisters, who are forced into political marriages for this sole purpose. In The Noble King as it was written, Sirius's little sister, Princess Octavia, had her brother's babies for him and saved the day. But now that Maki finds herself filling the role of Princess Octavia, she's not too keen on the idea of marrying some rando, giving birth to an heir, and bequeathing him to her brother. But she's already 16 years old, and at the point where, in the books, Octavia had made the noble sacrifice to be married off and have a baby so Sirius and Sil can be together. She doesn't have much time left. So she devises herself a scheme. She'll find herself a fake boyfriend, convince everyone that she's in love with him, so she won't have to be forced into a political marriage. Then, while she and her fake boyfriend are engaged and planning their wedding, she'll have about a year to find herself someone she actually wants to marry, break off the engagement amicably, and hopefully marry her true love. But as a princess, she's confined to the castle, and just about every man in her inner circle is gay. Any eligible nobleman she meets is much more likely to be attracted to either of her brothers than to her. Octavia's first love was one of her bodyguards, but he eloped with some ikemen. Her current bodyguard, Clifford, is so ridiculously pretty that she's convinced he'll run off with some other pretty guy any day now. The ladies in the castle, who had come there to work in hopes of meeting nice men to marry, all wander the halls with a vacant, dead fish sort of look in their eyes, upon the discovery that they'll be single forever. Octavia knows that feeling well. Things are looking pretty bleak for her love life. And before you write it off as an, oh no, everybody's gay, woe is me, it's so hard to be straight, it's not that, trust me. It starts out as a quirky rom-com, but it really grows. I don't want to give any spoilers in this review, but I will say that in addition to romance and meta-humor, there's adventure, mystery, intrigue, politics, religion, and some pretty fun world-building too. It's also interesting to see how patriarchy plays into the bizarre rules of this BL fantasy world. While the overall messaging of Watago is not anti-gay, Octavia's predicament as a straight female character in a BL world has two layers. The first is the personal, "Oh, woe is me, everyone is gay, how will I ever find my own romance?" While the second layer is systemic. This system of throne succession is unfair to women and girls. Can the system be changed? Now, before I go on, I must address an elephant in the room. You may be wondering how it was that I was able to read the book, script this video, film it, edit it, and upload it with closed captions no less, the very day that it was released by Yen Press. Well, that's because I was the translator. In the series, she has a fan of black feathers, but I didn't have time to make that for this cosplay, so I have a fan of comps. What made Watago not only a fun series for me to read, but for me to translate was Octavia in all her cringy fujoshi glory. While I don't think I was ever a full-blown fujoshi, I did enjoy my fair share of man-on-man fanfics and fan art back in the day. I also used to be an incredibly cringy otaku, but thankfully I grew out of that. Maki Tazawa reminds me of myself at that age, so it was a lot of fun channeling that while writing in her voice. When I noticed his gaze lacked its usual sharp gleam, my little fangirl heart threatened to go back into swoon mode. Hey, what's with those puppy dog eyes? How can someone so stoic and cool be so vulnerable? Is this that phenomenon I'd heard of only in name in my past life? The gap moe trope? No, serious, please don't screw a woman! Be gone, evil bitch! Bodyguards? Those heartbreakers are a no-go. A lady must never consider them romantic targets. Oh, I want you by my side forever, brave knight. Ooh. Nope, you won't see a dash of that from this girl. Woo. They kept wooing. Another element to Octavia that was fun to translate was her two-facedness. Since she's a Japanese teen otaku trapped in the body of a pseudo-European princess, this often causes her to say something dignified out loud, then immediately follow it up with a quippy thought. Dear brother, it pleases me that you and Lord Syl get along so well. However, we must be considerate when choosing the locations of our rendezvous. Don't make out in the hallway, assholes! Dear sister, how unusual to see you at the training grounds. My little brother stopped his sparring session and rushed over to see me. My face melted into a smile. Yes, well, I had a little matter to attend to. I'm on a manhunt, baby! Yep, so polite. He's always so polite. But, and this might just be my paranoia talking, I'm sensing major what the hell's wrong with this chick vibes from Alderton. If he's giving off those vibes because he doesn't want to quit, then I'm a happy girl. But I don't get that sense from him. However, I mustn't falter. Behold my mighty princess spirit! I covered my face with my fan. God, these fluffy feathers rock. I meant every word. I had a sudden worry that you might resign. So here's my case for why Watago isn't just another generic modern isekai and why you should give it a chance. Octavia is not an overpowered protagonist. She's a flawed character who has to find her own way to seize power. Her aspirations in the story aren't becoming a maid or a cook or a secretary or a housewife. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I love cooking. Octavia wants to free herself from the role imposed upon her and improve society somewhat in the process. The fan service is pretty minimal. In fact, if you are a fujoshi, you might be disappointed in the lack of man-on-man makeout scenes. If the world building in Watago ever does seem lazy or not fully fleshed out, there is actually a good reason for this, and it's part of the plot. And as for modern isekai being too insular and catering only to weebs, well, you can't win them all. Octavia is a fujoshi, and as most of the books are narrated in the first person, I did keep many terms like fujoshi, bishonen, ikemen, and gap moe in Japanese, since English-speaking fujoshi also tend to use these loanwords. But I did what's called explicitating, that is, weaving a short definition of the term into the sentence, like I did just now, whenever these loanwords are first used, so hopefully you won't have to be an otaku or a fujoshi to connect with and enjoy this series. Watago is Mamechoro's first light novel series, so it's only fitting that it was my first light novel series to officially translate. It didn't come without its challenges, of course, but I've really been enjoying translating it, and I hope that you all enjoy reading it. And if light novels aren't your thing, fear not. Yen Press will also be releasing the manga version starting in February. I have links in the doobly-doo for places where you can get this series. Oh wow, I got all dressed up in this costume, like, for not very much part of this video. Anyway, hi! It's been a minute, as they say. Yeah, so part of the reason why I haven't uploaded, like, a proper scripted video to this channel since, like, April, the BoJack Horseman video, is because I was busy working on this and other light novels and lots of work in general. It's been great, like, having a lot of work and having some job security and like being able to like catch up with my bills and stuff. But as a result, I've had very little free time for anything else. But I'm finding the balance a little bit better now, so I should be able to get back to a regular upload schedule on this channel. So, you know, this channel doesn't exactly have a regular upload schedule. It's just sort of whenever I get around to it. And I'm currently working on the big video that I've been sort of, you know, teasing for the past year now. Believe me, I am actually working on the video. It's going to be a big one and it's going to be a long one, and I don't know if I'm going to upload any other video before it. But in the meantime, go subscribe to the sister channel if you're interested in at all in the translation process. I just did a whole series over there. I'm just finishing it up the next couple months, called Let's Translate Light Novels, where I go over in detail like how to translate light novels. Not this one, not this one, but a different light novel that's like way out of print. Oh right, I have to thank my patrons. No, like seriously, having the patrons really helped me through the first half of this year when things were really looking bleak before I just turned my whole career around by getting into light novel translation and manga translation. But anyway, special shout out as always to Greg, Lay, Henry Roaming, and Data Fox for like being the super patrons. Like between the four of them, we have our utility bills covered, so I don't have to worry about not having lights and like power for my computer so I can do my work. Anyway, do check out this light novel series or the manga when it comes out, and I guess that's it. Bye bye.